Welcome to MathLink. I am Mr. C, and we're going to connect the dots using trig function in this particular unit. Now, what we're going to discuss is how to operate or how to get the right value using the sine, cosine, tangent, and so forth on your calculators. So you want to take your calculator out, depending upon what type of calculator you got. It may be inputted differently, but we should all get the same answer once we input it correctly on the type of calculator that we have. So let's get started. So determining functions, we're looking at the trig functions. And we're going to focus a lot of times on the big three, as I said before on the previous video: sine, cosine, and tangent. So determining functions of giving angles is really accomplished by using a calculator. So you want to use your calculator and see if you get the same answer that I have gotten. The values of the angle is entered first. Sometimes you press sine, cosine, or some calculators, you can type in sine, find it. It's on your calculators. We have TI-83s, 84s. You can see the sign and then put in parentheses. Make sure those parentheses are included the angle itself. Now, I'm going to give you one that's a little bit challenging, but it's good to do. So in this case, we want to find the sine of 61 degrees and 41 minutes. Now, make sure your calculators are in degree mode. Some calculators will degree DEG, some would say radian, RAD. So make sure it's in degree mode. In your TIs, 83 or 84s, you may have to go into the mode function and make sure that it's in degree mode. Now, let me show you how we will handle this particular. So what you want to do is make sure your degrees are in decimal degrees. This is not decimal degrees. This is degrees in minutes. So you're going to have to convert that 61 degrees and 41 minutes into decimal degrees. Now, there are previous videos that I've shown how to convert from degrees, minutes, and seconds to decimal degrees. So make sure you look at those previous videos that's in our MathLink website to make sure you know how to do this. So really, I want to show you how to input it on a calculator and make sure you get it correctly. So for this example, excuse me, we have this. We have the sine, and how you write it is the sine of 61 degrees and 49 minutes. Now, normally we don't write it in like that. So you want to convert this 61 degrees and 41 minutes into a different number. So what I'm going to do, let me clear that. And I'm going to convert, and I'm going to use 61 degrees and 49 minutes and convert that to decimal degrees. So this is what we're going to have. We're going to use that 49 degrees, or 49, minutes, and we're going to divide that by 60. Remember, in that lesson that I've shown you in the previous videos, the key number is 60. And we want to get that decimal value. Why are we dividing by 60? Because we know that 60 minutes equals 1 degree. And so this gives me, if I do my math correctly, it's actually approximation. That's the symbol for approximation, like 0.816666 repeating. Now, some of your calculators may go 6667. Actually, the calculator, it round up, but it's really continuous 6 repeating. So how do I write this as, and this, as a decimal degree? This would be 61.816, where 6 is repeating. And so those two are equal, and you're going to use this degree in your calculator. So let's do this. So what we're going to do, depending upon your calculator, get familiar with your calculator, how it's done. Every calculator is done a little differently. I'm typing the sine, or you type in 61.8 and then hit the sine. So it depends on what you have. And let me just add about 3/6. And you're going to look up the sine of this, and just make sure it's in degree mode, of 61.81116. So once you know how to do the sine function on your calculator, use this particular degree, hit enter or equal, and the approximation of this answer, this would be your answer. The approximation is not exact. I think it should end up with 0.88144. And so let's look at how many decimal places we have. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. And so that round up to 5 decimal places, and that's what I have. So make sure you get the same thing. And we're going to, when our answer we get, let's go ahead and circle that so we understand that answer. So that sine of 61 degrees, 49 minutes, but you got to convert the minutes into a decimal so you're able to input it in your calculator. Once you do that, you have your decimal degree, input it in, to the sine function, and make sure you're in degree mode, and you should end up with that same answer. Now let's look at another example. Now, I'm going to say this before we do this example. If you have sine, cosine, and tangent, you can go directly on your calculator and find what the values of those angles are using what the example we just used earlier. So I just did the sine, but you do the same thing with the cosine tangent. Now I'm going to show you something a little different. Let's talk about the other three. And this one is the cotangent. This is a good example. So I want to determine the cotangent of 78.6 degrees and round it off to 5 decimal places. Now, if you look on your calculator, you won't have cotangent, you won't have secant or cosecant. So you're going to have to use the corresponding functions that corresponds to those functions. So in this example, we're looking at the cotangent. And you got to ask yourself, what other function is the function that is reciprocal to the cotangent? You got to know that. And so in our case, what is reciprocal to the cotangent, and let's see if you know already, see a lot of you know, it's going to be the tangent. So you're going to have to use the tangent function on your calculator to figure out the cotangent. Okay, so you got to know the relationships. So let's just use this one in particular to show you how to do it in your calculator. So in this case, I'm going to use a different color so we can have what we see here. We're going to find, first, you're going to find the tangent of 78.63 degrees. Now notice the degrees is already in decimal degrees. There's no minutes or seconds, so you can actually use those degrees, 78.63 degrees. So first find the tangent of that on your calculator. So let's do that. And this is reinforcing, making sure you know how to find angles using the big three. So if I'm not mistaken, it's an approximation, it's not equal. I think it's going to be like 4.972884. I believe that's the number that you should have on your calculator. That is the tangent of 78.63 degrees. Now, remember, we're not trying to find the tangent, we're trying a cotangent. And the cotangent is the reciprocal of the tangent. So once we find this value, now you need to find a couple ways you can do it. On your calculator, there's a key that may look like this. It's like 1 over x. You can use that key. So look for that key. Or you can use another key on some calculators, x to the -1 power. And what that does, it flips the inverse. It gives you the inverse of that number. It gives you the reciprocal of whatever the number we're working with. And so what you're going to actually do is you either can use this key or this key on this number up here. So in essence, what you're doing is you're going to say 1 over 4.9724. And if you actually want to do that on your calculator, do 1 divided by that. It also will do that. So you can use a division sign. So once you do 1 over that, that will be our answer because it's the reciprocal. The tangent is the reciprocal of the cotangent, or the cotangent is the reciprocal of the tangent. Once you do that, the approximation of this will be, I believe, 0.20109, and that's going to 5 decimal places. And so that will be our answer. And how I'll write my answer, let's write it in a different color so we can see how to write the answer. I would say the answer would be the cotangent, you can see COT of 78.6 degrees is equal to, or approximately, 0.20109. And then I would like to circle that so you know that's my answer. And so that's how you do determining functions of the cotangent, the secant, and the cosecant. Again, you got to know which function of the big 3 is the reciprocal of the other one. And that's how you do these particular problems for the other 3 trigs. Now, one of the last concepts I want to show you trig functions is when you're giving what the functions equal, and now we want what the angle is. In the past is I gave you the angle and you gave me what the function is equal to. Now I'm going to give you what the function is, and you're going to have to tell me what the angle is. And so in this procedure, I won't go in great detail with what's on the board, but you can look at it, pause, and read it. You're going to use a function key called the sine inverse, or the tangent inverse, or the cosine inverse. So those are big 3. And so we want to be familiar with seeing this on our calculator. And what we see here, I'm going to circle it, sine inverse, cosine inverse, and tangent inverse. You use those to help you find the angle. And the angle is the unknown. Okay, so let's get started. So let's determine the angle. If we find that the tangent is 1.902, and then round the answer to 2 decimal places. So let's actually do this example here. In this example, how will we write it? And you like to show the work. And again, you can use this same concept with cosine and sine. So, but in this case, we're going to use tangent. So how we write this, say the tan of our angle, for right now we'll say angle A stands for angle, in parentheses, is equal to 1.902. We know what it's equal to, we want to find the angle, and that's how you write it. Now, in order to do this, what we're going to do, and remember, since it's equal, what we do on one side, we do on the other side. We're going to look on our calculator, and I'm going to show you the work. You're going to do the tan inverse. Again, since we're using a tan function, we'll use a tan inverse on both sides. And so what the tan inverse does with the tan, it gets A by itself. So let's put that back in blue. So once I do the tan inverse, so that's, and you don't have to do this on the calculator, just watch me. A will equal to, now A will equal to what? Inverse of 1.902. Now, what we need to do on a calculator is type in 1.902 and then find, and click tan inverse. Make sure your calculator's in degrees. Now, if you're using a TI 83 or 84 or something similar to that, the Inspire, you can just type in or use the function tan inverse, type in the what is equal to 1.902, hit enter, and it should give you the same answer. So you have to be familiar with your calculator. So this is how you find the angle. Now, if I'm not mistaken, our angle should be approximately 62.26629, I believe, degrees. Now, again, we want to round the answer to 2 decimal places. So what we want to do is we want to stop here. So in order to stop here, that's our second decimal place. We need to look at the third to see if it's 5 or greater, which it is. Then that 6, that first 6 will become a 7. So my answer would be this. And I'll write the answer in green. The answer would be 62.27 degrees, 27 degrees. And then I will circle that. So that is angle A. Angle A equals 62.27 degrees. You do it on your calculator, you would end up with 1.902 as an answer. So we're on our whiteboard, and I want to look at one more function, and then I give you some practice problems to see if you got the concept. So let's say we want to find the secant. Angle A is equal to 1.2263. Now already you're thinking, Mr. C is not the big 3, right? It's not tangent, it's not cosine, it's not sine. It's not sine, cosine, or tangent. So you already know that there's an extra step when it comes with the other 3. And we know we're going to be using some reciprocal. So we got to know how to do this. Now, the first thing you're going to ask yourself, and hopefully you can say this out loud, what relationship, what's the big 3 relationship? What big 3 is in relationship with the secant? Do you remember? If you know that, this will make this a lot simpler when we do this. And that's correct. It's going to be the cosine. So the cosine and the secant has a relationship. So on the side, I'm going to put down cosine. So we know we're going to be somehow using the cosine function. Okay, let's just underline that. They have a relationship. So when you do the secant of A is equal to 1.2263, and this has to do with cotangent and the cosecant, the first thing you're going to have to do is you're going to have to take the reciprocal of this value here. What I mean is you're going to have to look at your calculator. You can use this button, or you use this button, or another way to do it, if you like it this way, is basically say 1 divided by 1.2263. That's the first thing you need to do before we do the problem. And so if I'm not mistaken, this is approximately, let me see, I think it's like 0.8. Yeah, it's gonna be pretty high, 0.81546. So double check my math, make sure that's correct. And that's the number you're gonna work with now. So you won't work with 1.2263, you will work with 0.81546. That's only for the other 3 trigs. You won't use them directly, you gotta take the reciprocal. And so in this case, you're going to say the cosine or cos inverse of 0.81546. Again, there is no secant button on there, so you got to use the cosine. But in order to use the cosine, you got to change these numbers. And so you use the cosine inverse of 0.81546. That will give me approximation. And again, we're only rounding off. I'm going to round out to 2 decimal places of 35 point, I think, let me say 37 degrees. And so that would be our answer for that particular one. Now here's some practice problems. I'm going to ask you eventually to pause this screen and try A through E on your own and see if we get the same answer. If you don't, retry to make sure you do this. I'm going to give you a hint on these right here, is that for this A, for B, A and B, you want to go directly. And then C, D, and E, you want to find the relationship of the big 3. Which big 3 is in relationship to that? Now, again, we're trying to find the angle. So you're going to have to go back and know the process of how we find the angle. So if you want to pause and go back to the beginning of how we found angles, you can do that, or you could pause and try these problems. So give me a few minutes to try these on your own, and then I'll reveal the answer to each of these for you to make sure you did that correctly. So let's look at the answer of these, and I'm going to do just one. I'm going to do part C just to make sure you got the concept of doing this correctly. So these are the answers from A to E, and see if you got the same answers. Again, make sure your calculator's in degree mode, and we should end up with those answers. If you got those answers, that's great. Now, if you didn't, redo it again. Go back, try it again if you understand what went wrong. Now, what I like to do is part C. Now, part C, let's do that one. That one is an indirect. The first two are direct, but C, D, and E is indirect. So in that particular one, I believe for C, and I'm going to just circle C so you know I'm doing C. It was, I believe, the secant of angle A is equal to 3.65, what was it? 306. I believe that was the number. Now, in order to find angle A, we're first going to have to find the reciprocal of that number. So in other words, the second step is you have to find 1 over 3.65306. Excuse my handwriting, it gets better. And I believe that's an approximation of 0.27374. I think that's approximation. Check my math. Now you're going to use that number and put a check right there. You're going to use that number for the what relationship the secant is in relation with. So what's the relationship of the secant? What big three? Right, it's the cosine. So what you're going to do now is use the cosine, the inverse function, cosine of 0.27374. So now do that. Again, you got to know what one you're going to use, which one you're going to use. And then once you put that in your calculator, you should end up with this value right here, 74.112 degrees. If you want to go to 2 decimal places, it'll be 74.11. Again, I hope it'll help. And again, go over this video, get a better understanding, get a better grip on how to use trig functions, finding the angles and the sides, what's given to us. Again, as we always said, let MathLink bring it together. And again, thank you for watching this video.